Okay, it is 6:30 this evening. Welcome to the Boone Community School District Board of Directors meeting. And we'll start with roll call. Mr. Lewis?
Nystrom.
Here.
Teven.
Here.
Pritchard.
Here.
Melhouse.
Here. The first order of business is recognition of visitors. And Julia, do we have anything there? I don't see anyone in our audience that I don't recognize as being a regular guest. Anything in the chat room? I see nothing, so We're going to move on to consideration of the agenda. Are there any changes, additions to the agenda? Okay.
No, there are no changes.
Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as printed?
This is Pam. I move to accept the agenda as printed.
Okay, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Nystrom, seconded by Mr. Pritchard to accept the agenda as posted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion passes. Next is the hearing of delegations. This is the point in our agenda where we open up and accept comments from the public or concerns. I believe we have someone here to speak about the YSS Kids Club program, Light and the Lights After School program. I'm going to recognize them right now. I believe it's Tori. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, you have the mic.
Awesome. I'm Tori McKay, and I am the site supervisor for the YSS Boone Kids Club program. And then my supervisor, Jennifer, is also on. So Jen, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Schmidt. I'm the Kids Club manager. It's a pleasure to be here. We're very excited.
We really just thought this was a good time. So I'm going on my second year here at YSS. I have not met with the school board since I've been in my position. Autumn is who I work closely with because our program is housed out of Page Elementary. But I just thought it would be a good time to share a little bit about our programs and what we do at YSS. I'll talk a little bit more about it. But we are celebrating Lights On After School during the month of October. So just kind of raising awareness for after school programs. So we have a little presentation. We know your time's valuable, so we'll kind of go through it as quick as we can. But myself, Tori, and then my supervisor, Jen, is here. So Kids Club is a program that's provided by YSS in coordination with the Boone Community School District. Our program runs before and after school care at Page Elementary here in Boone. In addition to before and after school care, we also run care on the early out Wednesdays that the school has. Any no school days or teacher in service days, we offer all day care on those days for our families. And then also winter break and spring break, we run all day program as well. During the summertime, we also run a summer program, which has been held at Franklin Elementary in the past, but we've worked it out with Autumn that we've been able to stay at Page during the school year and the summertime. So that's very nice for us, not having to do that move over for those couple of months in the summer. So we offer care for children that are kindergarten all the way up to 6th grade, and our family fees are based on a sliding fee scale based on families' incomes. Our goal is really just to make our program affordable for all the families in the community that need our services. So I know that's something that a lot of families do appreciate about our program, that we do have that sliding fee scale so we can hopefully accommodate everybody that needs us. The mission of our Kids Club program is to provide a safe and nurturing, stimulating environment in which children are learning and growing. Research tells us that the hours between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. are peak hours for juvenile crime, experimentation with drugs and alcohol. Kids Club provides an opportunity for families to have their children in not only a safe environment after school, but one in which they are challenged to learn new concepts and explore new ideas, build relationships with their peers and other adults, engage themselves in a variety of physical activities, and also give back to the community through community participation and service learning projects that we do. So here during the month of October, we're celebrating Lights On After School. This is a national initiative that celebrates after school program and highlights the needs for our services. We will be among more than 8,000 sites across the nation that will help send the message that after school is key to children's success and that we must keep the lights on after school for kids. A little bit more about our Kids Club programs that you might not know. We do operate a total of 9 different sites around the area. Jen, my supervisor, has been working very hard as we did just recently open 3 new sites amongst all the craziness that's going on. But we opened a new one in Madrid. We're working on getting one up on Iowa State campus in Ames, and also opened one in South Hamilton. We've had the Boone program going. We also have one in Ogden. Our Gilbert site has 2 different locations that they run out of, and then Ballard and Roland Story as well. We're all working on putting together a video or a slideshow that kind of highlights all the things that we do at our after school, all of our after school club programs. We'll hopefully be sharing it on our Kids Club Facebook page, hopefully here later in October. If you guys want to, feel free to check that out. Again, the month of October, we're just really trying to promote what we do at Kids Club and share the importance of after school with everybody in the community. Typically in October, we hold an open house at Page where we invite community members in. Unfortunately, during these times, we're not able to do that. So we're doing the slideshow, and then we're also putting together little at-home fun bags for all of our families that have some coupons to different places around the area. I actually got the Boone Movie Theater to donate some tickets and some coupons for the Boone Theater to help families get out in the community too. So that's some stuff that we're working on right now. A little bit more about Kids Club. So even though all of our children love to play outside, recess is always a popular thing amongst all of our kids, and they love their outside time and playing with toys and with their friends. We do lesson plans every day. And we focus on many different areas, really try to run with what the kids are most interested in and what they want to learn a little bit more about. So some of the things are listed there, obviously including but not limited to, if one of them has an idea, something they want to learn about, or an activity they want to try, then we kind of run with that and go with what the kids are interested in too. At all of our Kids Club sites, we teach a prevention curriculum called Lion's Quest, and it kind of talks about topics that can be challenging to talk with kids about, including positive behavior, making connections and relationships at school, talking about character building, drug and alcohol awareness. We do talk a little bit about bullying in that curriculum, and then service learning projects as well. So, that's all we really wanted to share with you guys, just to share a little bit of information about Kids Club and what we do. I'm not sure how many of you are fully aware of our programs or what exactly we do at Page Elementary in the afternoons after school, but I hope you feel a little bit more informed now about hearing about our programs. So we very much value the relationship that we have between YSS Kids Club and the Boone Community School District. And we only hope to continue to grow that relationship. Like I said, I work closely with Autumn being at Page, and I very much, like I said, value the relationship that we have. We work very well together, and I think showing families and the kids that we are a partnership between school and what they're doing after school is just really good for everybody. So thank you very much for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good job, Tori.
Thank you. If you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to either one of us. But yeah, we're happy to share what we do. And again, we're happy to be part of the community and offer the services that we can.
Thank you very much, Tori. And for newer board members, I believe that once a year we do approve that contract. But it seems like that is a contract we do in the spring or early summer, if I remember right. I think we've done it for this calendar year already. So, any other questions for Tori, or else we'll move on? Tori, I'd like to thank you and your boss Jennifer for signing on tonight, and have a nice evening.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Okay, we're gonna move on the agenda. Next is we have the consent agenda, and entertain a motion for that. I believe we have 3 extractions that I saw, so we have a motion.
This is Pat. I saw 2 extractions. Am I missing one? So I approved the consent agenda except for in the October bills, the Boone County Family Medicine for $770 and Pritchett Brothers for $743.44.
I believe there was a second one for Pritchard's for about 10,000 and change.
Okay.
It was down under the Pebble. There's a Pebble.
Pebble. Okay. And the one for Pritchett Brothers for the amount just mentioned. And I will look that up.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, it has been moved by Ms. Stevens, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to approve the consent agenda with pulling out the bills, Boone County Family Medicine for $770 and 2 Pritchard Brothers bills.
$10,382.43.
$10,238.40 approximately, and the other one. Is there any further discussion? Anything else anyone would like to extract or have any comments, questions, concerns about? I would ask, I noticed there are no open enrollment in or out. Is that because we had none this month?
There are open enrollments. There's I believe 2 families that moved that were already pending names and wanted to continue.
I don't see them on this consent. No, I printed these off at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So, okay. Okay, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the 3 extractions, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Okay. And now we have 3 other bills. The first one is for Boone County Family Medicine, which I believe was $770. Is there a motion on that bill?
I move to accept the bill for Boone County Family Medicine for $770.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Ms. Stevens, seconded by Mr. Pritchard to approve the bill for Boone County Family Medicine for $770. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? And I'll be abstaining from that vote. Motion passes. Now, we have 2 other bills. I'm going to put them together into one motion. If I could get from the floor.
I move to accept the payments for Pritchett Brothers for the amounts of $743.44 and $10,382.43.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, been moved by Mrs. Stevens, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to approve Pritchard bills for $743 and change and $10,382.43. Any further discussion? Otherwise, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And abstentions?
Aye.
Okay, let the record show Mr. Pritchard abstained. The motion passes. Next, we're going to go to the swearing in of a new board member. As many of you know, Reverend Weber resigned last month, and the board went through an extensive search process with 13 different applicants. And after extensive review, the board nominated and approved unanimously Mr. Matt Elfon to join our board of directors. So I'm going to let Mr. Lewis swear him in.
You have a motion and a second to approve it.
I'm sorry, we do need a motion and a second to approve Mr. Elfon.
I move to approve Mr. Alphon as our
Okay,
new.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Nystrom, seconded by Mr. Pritchard to approve Mr. Elfon as the new school board member. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion passes. Now we can officially swear in Mr. Elfin.
Try to hand up. Do solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you'll faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of your office of the Board of Boone Community School District and Boone Community School District as now and here forever required by law?
I will.
Okay, thank you very much. Someone's got their speaker on here. I'm hearing a lot of static, but okay, thank you, Mr. Elfin. Welcome to our board.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear about elementary school financing. I know I saw Matt on here earlier. Yes, he is there.
Yep. Hello, Brian.
And as many of you know, I hope, we are looking at putting a new elementary school out in the southeast portion of the community. In order to do this, we're going to have a bond issue, and Matt Gillespie is from Piper Jaffray, and Piper Sandler now, pardon me, they changed their name. And he has always been our finance guru to go through the bonding issues. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you and Mr. Lewis.
Yep. I am going to share my screen here in just a second, and I just want to confirm everybody can hear me, correct?
I can hear you.
All right.
Yes.
So hold on just a second, and I will share this. Okay, so you should see now on the top left corner of your page, debt limit calculation. So there's going to be a couple pages we're going to look through here. This first one is kind of overriding everything that you do as far as bonding is concerned, because regardless of how much support you might have in the community and how much people might love to pay taxes in your community, there are limits to what you can borrow by state law. So this little page is showing what that limit is. We call it the statutory debt limit or the constitutional debt limit. And the calculation is 5% of your assessed property value. So what you see there is your 2019 assessed value, which is the most recent number we know. We're always a year behind with property values, so we won't know the 2020 values until right around January 1st of 2021. But as of this summer, July 1 of this past summer, your assessed property value, excuse me, was $1,019,000,000, and 5% of that number is $50.9 million. So that becomes the maximum amount of principal that the school district can have outstanding at any given time. Of course, the number is going to change next year because the property value will change next year, as we hope also that Mitch keeps making bond payments, so you keep paying down principal on the debt as well. And also, I should point out that the same limit is equal for cities, schools, counties, community colleges. Every municipality in the state is limited in the same way. So it's not just unique to school districts. So of the 50.9 million, you do have debt outstanding. And what you see there subtracting off those items is the principal that remains. So the net effect is that you have, as of right now, the capacity to issue $27.3 million in new principal. And that could come from sales tax bonds, PEPL notes, or general obligation bonds, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But before I leave this page, I want to maybe just sort of stress what that number really means. If you had a $40 million or $400 million project that you were just certain that the district absolutely needed, and even if the community would support such a big project, you cannot do it because you don't have the capacity to do it with bonding. Now, if somebody was going to write you a $40 million check and pay cash, that is a different story, but that certainly is not going to happen in any community. So the 27 million is basically kind of your high side. So if you're talking ultimately about a $7 million or $10 million or $15 million borrowing, whatever it might eventually be, I think what this tells us is that you have the capacity to do that. As long as you're not getting up to the 27 million, you still are leaving yourself some capacity in case there is some other need or emergency, etc. So before I go to the next page, any questions that the board members have about that calculation? Nope. I will go on. You can stop me later and ask questions anytime if you want. So this page is PEPL. You have a voted PEPL in your district, and you can borrow against that voted PEPL. However, you're currently using voted PEPL, at least for the most part, on technology, transportation, general maintenance, tuck pointing, cement work, new vehicle purchases, whatever it might be. So at least historically, that's what you've used the voted PEPL revenues for. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't change your mind. You could borrow against it. And this is showing what if you did borrow against the remaining authority, and you have that authority through fiscal year 29, because it's voted for a 10-year period at a time. And in your case, you have a $1.34 maximum tax levy, which is what generally you will levy each year. Now, this particular worksheet is showing what you might be able to borrow next spring, and if the average interest rate were to be 1.5%. So that's a guess, obviously. We don't have a crystal ball to know where interest rates are going to be tomorrow, let alone 3 months or 3 years from now. Literally, if you could do this borrowing today, that rate might actually be a little bit lower than that. It may be somewhere between 1% and 1.2-ish%. And of course, by next spring, it may still be in that range. And of course, interest rates may rise too. We don't know. Lower the interest rate, the more you can borrow. In any of these scenarios that we're going to talk about, higher the interest rate, the less you can borrow. But what we see here in the bottom left corner is that if you chose to borrow against the voted PEPL, you could probably generate somewhere around $6 million to spend on projects, which might be architect's costs, land purchase, construction costs, whatever those needs may be. One advantage to borrowing from PEPL, and this isn't necessarily the reason why you would choose to use it, but is that the board has the authority to do it right now. You don't need any additional input from your community, no voting from the community. The community can't stop the process by petition, which we'll talk about in a second, from sales tax. So the board really has quite a bit of flexibility to use voted PEPL for these types of projects. But again, if you don't want to use the PEPL because you can't get enough money, which you can only get $6 million, that certainly is not enough money to build a new elementary school, although you could piece some of these things together, as you'll see. So we'll go to the next page. Now, this is a voted general obligation bond. So this is, at least in the past, what Boone has used for several of your larger projects, and you do have voted general obligation bonds outstanding. So to borrow this type of money, you have to have an election. That election requires 60% approval at the ballot box, and you can only have the election on certain days each year. 2 days in even years, 3 days in odd years, I believe, or flip-flop. But the next election date you could possibly have would be March, so a few months from now, which seems like that's kind of a little bit of time between now and then, but it's really not, because this process is fairly onerous. It requires petitions to be circulated, legal language to be created, and you have to do all of this stuff and get it all filed with the county auditor no less than 46 days before the election date. So that's in mid-January. So if you were really going to go down the path of voting in March, you'd need to start discussing the language that would be on that ballot, which is the same language that would be on a petition. It's identical verbatim language. And the dollar amount, which we're going to talk about here in a second. All of that has to be determined and put down onto the petition. And then once that petition begins to circulate, the language and the dollar amount cannot change. So you would have to move forward with the election using that exact verbatim language and dollar amount, and hope that it either passes or doesn't pass. If you made a giant mistake and you wished you would have used different language, you kind of hope that the election fails by that time. But that's fairly not a very common thing to happen. But what we see here, this is a 20-year borrowing. Now, it doesn't have to be 20 years, but it can't be more than 20 years. Now, you could borrow in 2 different phases. So maybe you could borrow in the spring of 2021, for example, 20-year borrowing. And then you could borrow again in the spring of 2022 or 2023, which might still be during the construction phase of that of that elementary or that project. And if you did that, that second borrowing would have its own 20-year period. So you can ultimately capture maybe 21 or 22 years of taxation if you need to do that. Probably not, is my guess, because an elementary, although they are getting more and more expensive, generally is not going to be probably more than this amount. Now here we're also using a guess at the interest rate. We don't know where it will be next spring or the spring after that, etc., depending on when you might get an election to pass. But you see in the far right column that's yellow, this would take your tax levy up to close to $4.05, which is the maximum that it can be. But that's also what you have been levying in recent years, because you've actually been levying more than your annual payment requires on your existing bonds, which, if you can see my cursor, this third from the right column shows the payments that you already have, roughly $1.6 million a year on the existing general obligation bonds. So you've been levying above and beyond that to prepay that debt, which is a very good thing to do for many reasons. Now, the most obvious is that if you can prepay debt, just like you or I might want to do that in our personal lives, you can save lots of interest. So you've been doing that, and you've been saving your taxpayers that interest by doing those pre-levies. But you've also been sort of conditioning people. I don't know if that was necessarily intentional, but that is the effect. When you have been levying $4.05 for the last year or more years, people have become accustomed to paying it. And now if you go out and have a bond issuance, you can honestly communicate to the community that that it wouldn't require a tax increase, at least not in the debt service fund. You know, there's lots of discussion things that can happen in your general fund and management fund and all the other funds that may cause your levy to go up or down, etc. But the debt service repays these bonds would still have the same tax levy, because instead of surplus levying or levying that extra amount to prepay bonds, the new bond would just take the place of doing that. So ultimately, the tax levy would be around $4.05 if you want to borrow or need to borrow the most you can. And that amount down here in the bottom left-hand corner, somewhere around $22 to $23 million. Now, the number that would be on the ballot in this example is this number right down in the bottom left-hand corner where my cursor is circling, $23,030,000, if you were using the largest number you could. But it could even be larger than that, because if you needed or wanted it to be larger, then you could capture it over that 21-year period like I suggested, and you could probably put a number as large as 25 or maybe even 26 million, and it would be acceptable, although you'd have to get some property valuation increase between the year you issue the first series and the year you issue the second series. But you'd also be capturing that 21st year. So now if your project is 16 million, 14 million, 19 million, then this discussion is not important. You could just put 16, 18, 19 million on the bond ballot and be done with it. But if you need a larger amount, what I'm saying is you don't have to put 23,030,000 just because Matt from Piper told you that number. You could choose to put a larger number if you needed. One cautionary note about doing that is that, of course, it's not guaranteed. If you put a larger number, let's just for argument's sake say you put 25 million on the ballot, and then you issued, let's say, 23 million the first year, and then you came back the second year to issue the other 2 million, if your property values had declined instead of increased, that could eliminate the ability for you to issue the remaining 2 million. And if you've already signed a binding contract for 25 million in construction, that could create obviously a problem. So for schools that choose to put a larger number on a ballot, generally what we recommend is that you break the construction bidding into some sort of phases so that you haven't legally bound yourself to the largest total construction project possible until you know with certainty that second year, your property value will support the issuance of the remaining principal. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So are there any questions about what you see on this page, or do you want to talk more about the process of a general obligation bond before we go to the page after this, which is going to be a sales tax bond?
One quick question. I got one question, Matt.
Yep.
Let's say we get into a situation like we're in now where construction costs rise unexpectedly due to COVID or, any varying, any number of circumstances. And we put the expected construction costs like $22 million on our bond.
Yep.
If there were some overages or some extra construction costs, can you supplement that with voted PEPL?
Yes, you would do a couple things. You would either, first of all, obviously constrain the cost and cut something out. That's not desirable usually because you've already submitted with the architect what you really want or need for the district. But, that's obviously something you could do, is cut a piece of it off so that the cost gets back down to the 22 million. Or, as you just suggested, you could come back and either borrow from PEPL. Maybe you don't need to borrow 6 million. Maybe you only need to borrow $1 million or whatever. Or maybe more importantly, you could contribute cash, because you do have a significant amount of cash right now, at least in your PEPL and sales tax funds. Now, you have other needs, obviously. So you have maintenance needs and bus needs and technology needs and all that. But there is a significant balance there. So it's possible that if the construction project came in over budget, you could fund the overage by just contributing cash out of your pocket. But if that's not possible, you could come back, yes, and issue either PEPL notes or sales tax bonds, which we haven't gotten to.
If there are no other questions, I'd like to hear the sales tax one, then we'll talk about a little bit more about the bonding process and where we would be best to borrow against.
Yes. So this last page then is the hypothetical sales tax bond. So the district has also issued sales tax bonds in the past, and you see that in the fourth from the right column here. These roughly $1 million payments annually are to fund or make payments, principal and interest payments on existing bonds that you have. And you see that those payments end in 2028. That's because the sales tax was going to end before December 31 of 2029, and you refinanced some bonds about a year ago, and you shortened the payment by a year to 2028. But then last July 1st of 2019, the legislature extended the sales tax. So they extended it out actually to 2051. So legally you could borrow for basically a 30-year period. But I hope that you and no other school decides to do that because the interest cost just becomes incredible on a 30-year borrowing. But I'm sure someone will. But I'm only showing you here a 20-year borrowing because that seems to be more reasonable, because that sort of matches up with what schools do with general obligation bonds. So this is just assuming that you chose to borrow next spring or summer against the sales tax for a 20-year period. There's no importance to this shading and why it ends here. That's a mistake. I should have just carried that shading down, so just ignore that. But you see, of course, there's very small principal payments up here because you have these large payments already existing between now and 2028. So you couldn't stack a whole bunch more principal and interest during the next 8 years, but then those payments would become much larger once we get out into 2029 and beyond, because the old bonds have now been retired because they get paid off in 2028. You are not borrowing dollar for dollar, not because you couldn't legally do that, but because no bank in their right mind would lend to you dollar for dollar on sales tax. Because if you lost one student, if that happened, you'd lose the revenue from the student and you'd default on paying the bonds. You wouldn't have any extra cushion or anything. So generally, banks are willing to lend you to a point where you have somewhere around 1.3 times coverage, or $1.30 in revenue coming in for every dollar you owe. That's what these calculations here are showing. That doesn't mean you need to borrow to that amount, but that's probably where you could borrow. Again, the interest rates are examples. If you could borrow for 20 years today, excuse me, it would probably be somewhere around 2.5-ish, somewhere in that range. And of course, if you don't borrow till next spring or summer or beyond, who knows where interest rates will be. But of course, your enrollment also changes and sales tax per student annually changes. So the whole mechanism here kind of is constantly evolving, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse, depending on the district. If interest rates keep going down, then you can borrow more money. But at the same time, if your enrollment, and this is certified enrollment, so the number of students who physically live in the district, if your enrollment goes down, that also decreases your bonding capacity. But if your enrollment goes up, obviously it increases it. And then statewide per student revenues also impact these numbers. But ultimately, the net impact here for you guys for your discussion tonight is this number up here in the top left corner. Out of issuing maybe around $18 million of principal, you could probably fund a little over $16 million in project costs. And the reason that those numbers are, so different is this number that's right here where my cursor is in the top left-hand corner. For these longer term borrowings, although it's not an absolute, it's nothing that's dictated by law, but the lenders are generally going to require that you set aside a reserve fund. And so that's what this number is here. So off the top of the $18 million borrowing, you would very likely set aside around $1.5 million that you couldn't touch. Basically, it goes in a lockbox, can't touch it. You can earn interest, you can spend the interest, but you can't touch the 1.5 million until the bonds are completely paid off, which in this case would be 20 years. So the net effect here is that you might be able to spend somewhere around 16 million for a project if you borrowed from sales tax. So if that's enough to fund the elementary, you wouldn't need any voting to do this because you already have the authority to do it from the revenue purpose statement, but you would have to have a hearing. And the hearing would be because you're issuing sales tax bonds, period. Part of that law change last summer of 2019, was that anytime a school district borrows against the sales tax for any reason, even when you refinanced last year, you had to have a public hearing, which is easy. Obviously, it's not a big deal, but the public hearing now comes with a 15-day window during which citizens can petition the school district and stop them from issuing the bonds and stop them from funding the project. Now, not just one person can do that. It requires 100 citizens to sign the petition, or 30% of the number that voted in the most recent school board election, whichever is larger. And those petitions need to be provided or submitted to the school board president within the 15-day window of when you hold that hearing. So the day you hold the hearing is day one, and then 14 days after that, so in other words, you do not want to be signing contracts with construction people, architects, etc., until you know for sure that you did not get petitioned during that 15-day window. So if you think that petitions are a possibility, then the sales tax bonds would not be a route you'd want to take, because obviously the petitions could stop the process. Sales tax bonds in general are more expensive for you. Usually you pay a slightly higher interest rate for them and higher fees. And of course you have to generally set aside the reserve fund. You see with the general obligation bond here, there is no reserve fund being set aside because they're backed by property taxes. So there's really little chance that the district wouldn't be able to make those payments. And while for the sales tax bond, there we hope is little chance you couldn't make the payments, the fact is there is no recourse if your enrollment were to drop significantly, like 300 students all at once. That would be a problem. Versus if your property value dropped with general obligation bonds, it's not a problem. You just have to levy a higher tax levy rate to generate the same amount of funds. So the GO bonds are more secure, and therefore you pay less costs and lower interest rates, etc. But of course, you've got to have an election that requires 60% approval. Now, I like general obligation bonds personally, although I don't live in your district, so my opinion doesn't really matter, because it is getting the community's vote or getting their say. You have an election, 60% of the people have to agree to it. Now, even if they were to defeat it, it doesn't mean you couldn't move forward, because then you could come back to sales tax bonds and do that. You'd have to have the petition, so you could get petitioned. That'd be a risk politically. but you do have other options there. So I'll stop talking and see what kind of questions you guys have.
Just an FYI first, folks. That petition would require about 600 signatures because we had about 2,000, just short of 2,000 votes in the last school board election. So ballpark math, or cowboy math, as one of our former board presidents used to say, we put it about 600 for that petition. So questions from board members toward Matt?
Okay, I have a question, Matt. So if you went with the sales tax process and you used the 16 million and you found out that you needed 18 million after all, could you go to PEPL?
Yes, you could. It's sort of the same situation that I think Jeremy had. You could either cut something out to keep the project at 16 million. You could use your own cash, which you do have the capacity probably to contribute, a fairly significant amount. And that is another option. And I think, that's something that Mitch can probably discuss with you guys, that not necessarily tonight, but you do have some cash. So even if you had an $18 million project, maybe you'd be comfortable contributing $2 million of your own cash in order to get the borrowing down to 16 million. And that could be whether it's sales tax or GO, just to get the borrowing to be a lower amount. And I made $2 million up. I just made that up as an example. I'm not committing you to doing anything like that. But yes, the answer is that if you did this, what you see on this page, and got 16 million, and then you found out you needed 18 million, you could then come to PEPL and borrow the other 2 million if that's what you needed to do. Again, a caveat to that though, when you start to commit both sales tax and PEPL for bond repayment, it's depleting your resources for your ongoing routine needs like school bus purchases or leases, just general maintenance, technology purchases, all of those things which you typically are using sales tax and PEPL for. There is a level that you could borrow from both and you'd be okay. We can calculate what that level would be, and it would be dependent on what the school board told us they believed they needed on an annual ongoing basis for those other needs. And we have estimated those things. And I can tell you that you could probably borrow the 6 million from PEPL and the 16 million from sales tax. So you could probably get around $22 million from both of those sources. And you could still fund those routine needs, the buses, the technology maintenance. There would be enough extra money to do that, except there would probably be just enough money to do that. So there wouldn't be a lot of extra money for emergencies or other projects that you wanted to fund outside of the routine stuff. So I think for the most part, probably I hope the school board would choose not to borrow the maximum from both sources to leave yourself that cushion for those ongoing needs. Or of course you go to the general obligation bond, which doesn't touch those sources. And one comment about that, I went back to the general obligation page on my screen. Something that schools do, and your school actually did it to a very significant degree in the past, was that they use sales tax and or PEPL monies to make portions of the general obligation bond payment. So that's another reason why the general obligation bond is, for many reasons, it's a more attractive way to borrow, except that you need 60% approval. If you can eliminate that political hurdle, which you can't, but because that is a big hurdle in every district. But if, let's say that there's no question you can get the general obligation bond passed, so, and you do, well then in future years, if you look along this second from the right column, your combined bond payment on your existing general obligation bonds and the new bond are around 2.4 million. But in any year, you could choose to use sales tax or PEPL to help make part of this payment and lower the tax. You don't have to do that. And even if you told the community that it was your intention or your desire to do it, it's not an absolute guarantee. but it's just one more level of flexibility that you have from year to year. If you have general obligation bonds, you can always fall back and levy the property taxes, and you can always use other funds to help make the payments as well.
I'll just for the new board members, traditionally, the board has not done a whole lot with bonding in the Pebble Fund for new construction, just because we need to have reserve, not for school buses, vans, maintenance. You blow a furnace system in a building, you need to spend $500,000 on redoing a roof, that type of thing. In fact, we have a 3-year rolling plan as far as where we're going to make our expenditures and use that Pebble funding, and then we keep updating that about every year or two. And so we've always tried to stay away from the Pebble and for our bonding, just because there's enough other places that we need that money every year. We've got other issues going to come up in the next 2 to 4 years, that routine expenses that the board has traditionally tried to stay away from committing that Pebble to the general obligation bonds. So just kind of an FYI for everyone here. Now, Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about the bonding process if we do go with the general obligation bonds and GOAs?
Yep. So for a general obligation bond, again, it's a little bit more onerous because first what happens is that there is, and it doesn't have to happen this way, the school board can do this themselves, but usually you have appointed some kind of a committee. That committee is working with the school board, the administration, but also with the architect, probably also the teaching staff, parents, students, etc. Generating ideas on what the district needs. I think you've already been through, some of that, because you already know you want or need this elementary. So you may not need the committee, but it is the committee, usually not school board members, that would take that petition out into the community and get the signatures that are required. The administration and or the school board can help create the language that goes on to the petition. And of course, you would be using your attorney to help you with that. And that would almost always be Allers and Cooney, in your case, the law firm in Des Moines. So they would help you make sure that that language was covering everything that it needs to cover, including the dollar amount that is put on there. But once that petition language is created, which it could be created very quickly if you need it to be, but once it's created and then it's put onto the petition, and as I said earlier, then that committee, and that could be a committee of 2 people, it could be a committee of 20 people, probably not more than 20 or 30 people. It gets a little bit too crazy when there's too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen. But whatever it is, that committee takes the petition out into the community, gets the signatures. The signatures need to be from people who are eligible to vote. It doesn't mean that the people even support the project, to be honest. Anyone can sign the petition. And on that note, you got to make sure that it is people that are eligible, meaning citizens of Boone Community School District. You don't want to have that petition put up at Casey's by the cash register, because Matt Gillespie, I drive through Boone, right? I drive through almost every town in Iowa, week to week as I travel around doing my job, and I love schools. So I might sign the petition because, shoot, I'd like you to have a new school. I love schools. But if my signature is on your petition and I'm not a resident, which I am not a resident of Boone, then that can create obviously problems, because it can only be valid, eligible voters. Now, it could be an 18-year-old who's never voted in their life and isn't even registered to vote, but they are eligible to vote just simply because they're 18 and they're a resident. So the petition gets the signatures, fairly easy to do usually. Then that petition is submitted to the school board president. And then the school board president has 10 days to announce that there's going to be a meeting. The meeting doesn't have to occur within the 10 days. It's just the announcement of the meeting has to be made within 10 days of receiving the petition. And that meeting is where the school board then accepts the petition or rejects the petition. If it's anywhere near legitimate, you will accept it. And I say that, of course, in this case, you guys are talking about it and it's really kind of your project. But let's just say, you know, Billy Smith, who lives out in the country, but lives within Boone School District, he thinks that your school district needs a 20-story pink silo to be built for the school. And he takes a petition. He creates it on his little typewriter and creates his own petition without any lawyer. And he goes around town and gets the signatures. And he thinks that that silo is going to cost $10 million. Well, $10 million is within your capacity to borrow. You could argue that a pink silo isn't something that the school needs, but it is something that could be built. So if it's something that is anywhere near legitimate, you must consider it and really almost have to accept it. But in your case, that's why you helped to fashion the language yourself. So the petition is filed with the board president. Board president calls for the meeting. The meeting is held. You accept the petition. And part of accepting the petition is that you pass a resolution to accept the petition. And that resolution directs the county auditor to call for the election. So that resolution must be filed with the county auditor no less than 46 days before the election date. And once that's done, according, you know, assuming you meet all the dates and rules, then the county auditor will call that election and then handle the election itself. You have to have 60% approval, as I said. If the election fails, you must wait no less than 6 months before you can bring a similar question back before the voters. And in these days, because the legislature changed some other rules last year as well about elections, 6 months can sometimes mean 12 months because there are not valid election dates that always fall within that 6 month window. So depending on when you have the election, in your case, if you did it in March, the next valid election would be September. It would actually be 6 months and 1 week. But if you held the election in September and it fails, then you could not have another election until the following September, because the only next valid election date would be the following March. And because of the exact dates, it's 1 week shy of 6 months. So that would force you to then wait 12 months if you had the election in September. So I'm not trying to suggest you should have an election and run out and do it, but if you are going to have an election, you might want to consider having it in March so that if it does fail, you can then at least have that election in September, you know, fairly soon thereafter to try to get that approval again. And then the project will probably begin in the spring of 2022. Whereas if you have an election in March of 2021, that project could begin, depending on what the architect tells you and how quickly they can move, it could begin in the summer of 2021.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Are there any questions from the board members? I will say that, again, based on our last school board election, we need about 500 signatures for this petition. We have indeed talked to some people who are starting to assemble a bond committee and are working on getting this off the ground here in the next 2 to 3 weeks time. So any other questions, concerns from board members?
Brian, if I can just, I know you're tired of listening to me talk and I love to talk, as you know from the past, but there's a couple things about a bond committee and things just real quickly that the board should be aware of. The committee can use school property to hold meetings if they want to, if the school allows them. That is assuming that you would also allow a vote no committee to also use school property if they wanted to meet. That's part of the law. You can't only allow the vote yes people to have a meeting. And if in fact you say there's no way we're ever going to let a vote no committee have a meeting in school property, then you also can't let the vote yes people do that. They would have to have a meeting somewhere else at the library or at a community center or something like that. So that wouldn't be possible. Once the petition begins to circulate, the school district cannot spend any school money on the voting process. So you can't pay for all the copies, you can't pay for making signs or any of that. That has to come out of the committee's pocket. Now that you can publish, the school can print factual information, such as what would happen to your taxes or what is the need, you know, the description of the building, that kind of thing. Those are facts, but you can't fund anything that is trying to sway people to vote yes or vote no. So keep that in mind.
And also the school board members, we ourselves cannot go out and encourage people to go vote yes. We can't put a bunch of vote yes signs in our yards or anything like that.
Well,
that has to be the committee's
actually, Brian,
responsibility.
that's not totally true. You can't do it on school property, but on your own property, you do have a legal right and First Amendment right. The attorneys, your attorney, will suggest that you don't do it, just so that you don't cause any kind of problem that then you have to go to court and, you know, prove that you have this right. But they will tell you that, for example, you can wear a button that says vote yes because you have a First Amendment right. You just don't want to do that while you are on school property, because then you are representing the school district yourself.
Okay. Any other questions? I believe traditionally, haven't been involved with the last two school board or the last two school bond issues. Traditionally, the vote yes committees have met off of school property. There have been businesses in the community that have allowed free access to their meeting rooms based on who has been running the committees. So so we've avoided that vote no use of the buildings in the past, and I would think we would want to probably continue that. However, there are other places that have allowed us to use their facilities without any or with minimal cost. Any other questions from board members? Otherwise, Matt, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight.
All right.
And
thank you, guys.
We'll probably be in contact with you in the future, hopefully.
Sounds good. Thank you and have a good night.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey, Mitch.
Yep.
You think at the next meeting or one of the upcoming meetings, we could have another session, like information session, where we could ask some more detailed questions and maybe look at some projections on our other levies, just to see how we're thinking our management in general, and especially the special ed are going to increase or decrease. I think that'd be important for everybody to understand.
Yep.
I believe that will be in our work session in 2 weeks' time, Jeremy. So, okay. Moving on, Ms. Tripa, the Apogee Project.
Yes, so we actually have a guest to answer any questions that we might have, but just so that everyone understands what Apogee is it's a company that provides services to schools that have an interest in ensuring that their brand stays consistent, in addition to helping to promote the brand of the school district and increase their communication with their constituents. And so, as you well know, you've had your public relations goal for several years now, and you've also spent a lot of time and energy as a district ensuring that our brand is consistent. And so Apogee is actually a company that I had worked with previously, and they have some opportunities for us as a district that would allow us to have two-way communication as well as more efficient one-way communication than what we currently have through our student information system. So that is something that I'm putting before you tonight for approval, because I know how important it is to our community. They've been extremely engaged in the work that we've done this year, especially with all of our COVID issues. And this would just provide our constituents another opportunity to do so. So in essence, not only would this particular company help us run our website, it would provide us with a school app that would be available on phones, And I believe I've shared with you as a board some articles that detail that many families, their only access to internet services oftentimes are their mobile devices. And so we want to make sure that all of our families have access to the communication that we're putting out, as well as an opportunity to contribute to the communication devices that we have. And given that most families do have mobile devices, we want to make sure that we have our tools that would enable that to occur. So at this point, I would just want to have Casey, who would be a representative from Apogee, share just a little bit about what it might look like if we were to move forward. And prior to turning it completely over to him, let you know that our Title IV dollars would be dollars that we could use for this particular project. Title IV can go toward technology tools such as this. So that's the funding source that we would be utilizing to fund this project. So at this point, I'm going to have Casey go ahead and share just briefly some pieces to what the app would provide to our families and to our staff that put the information out.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Julie. Hey, everybody. I'm Casey. I'll try to keep this shorter than 45 minutes, so don't worry about that. So real quick, like she mentioned, we've actually met with over 5,000 school districts across the country. Most of the school districts we talk to, fairly small and rural, right? We're not talking about 40, 50,000 kid districts. We're talking about the 500 student to 5,000 student district, right? Where Boone sits. Think about, West Monona, West Harrison, where we worked with Julie before. But a couple things that we hear from a lot of school boards and just leadership in schools in general is that we're having to think about how our brand is understood by our community, right? Whether it's thinking long-term about competition for teachers, right? How do we attract really high quality staff in an era of a teacher shortage? How do we continue to have positive gains in open enrollment? And then most importantly, right, how do we have effective and easy two-way communication like Julie mentioned there? So we build tools centered around that, because when you start to think about it, you guys all do this yourselves. We all have our smartphones out, right? I'm guessing the majority of you have either looked at yours tonight at some point or have it in your hands. But when you think about the best way to start reaching people and influencing that brand, it starts with more repeated interactions, right? Because if the only interaction somebody has with you is going to a website once every 4 months, how much are they actually going to see and understand about what we're doing, right? So the first thing that we would do with the district is essentially build tools to help every single online interaction that you would have with your community. So that's a mobile app for the district that your parents can download right there from their smartphones, Android, iPhone, download it for free and access all the district information, okay? Second, we would then build and host a new website. So that first impression that people do have is really positive, right? And then the last will be making it really easy for the district to manage its communication, because we know that you guys don't have $250,000 to go hire somebody to do all this, right? So we have to make it really, really easy for you all. So I guess before we dive into a couple of those examples, just wanted to make sure I do have a sense of how long we wanted to go. Were you guys thinking about 5 to 10 minutes here?
Yes, Casey, 5 minutes would be great.
Okay, cool. Well, I will speak on turbo mode then. So, no. So when we think about a mobile app, when you think about your interactions on your smartphones, the last thing we want to do is do it the wrong way, right? Because if we're thinking about our brand, if people have a bad experience with us, that's they're not coming back, right? That's really the worst thing that we can do. So I'm going to just show you a couple quick examples and we'll move through this. So let me know when everybody can see my smartphone screen here. Everybody got that? Okay, perfect. So what I mean by bad experience, right? We're trying to reach our families. We know everybody's on their phones. Let's say as a parent, we download the school app. We're looking for something quick like athletic schedules, okay? And that happens, okay? Everybody on the board with me on why this is super frustrating, right? And the reason I show you this is because there's a really big difference between just having a tool and then getting people to use it, all right? So let's take a look at West Monona, all right? Let's say I'm that same parent looking for something quick like a lunch menu or a calendar. boom, one click. Okay. Everybody see the difference there? So when we're thinking about those interactions, right, long term, when we think about that communication, the first step is it's got to be easy. And what happens is we get more people to come back to the app. We get more people to return. So everything that we're looking at, whether it's lunch menus or calendars, right, parents can access calendar of events right here from their phones, get in touch with somebody on staff right here from the app itself. Julie's already volunteered to put her cell phone number on all of the phone numbers so that we can all just call her directly. So don't worry about that. I'm just playing. But I'm hoping everybody sees just the ease of use here for that parent, right? Whether it's something small like a lunch menu, or the really great part here is then being able to promote the good things going on. So when we're thinking about that public relations goal you all have as a board, now you have a platform through our live feed section to be able to showcase the good things going on and keep people within your own brand so that you're not having to kick them out to Facebook. Okay. So I know I'm going through that pretty quickly. Actually had our designers put together a mock-up at like 5 o'clock tonight after Julie requested it. So I'm excited to show you all that real quick. But is everybody tracking with me on the user experience here on the app and why that's so important, or any questions on that? Cool. Either great overview there or everybody's really bored, but I'm just playing. Go ahead, sorry.
Doing well. Just keep going.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so had our team put together an example, wanted to show you guys a quick mock-up that we drew up for you all. So imagine, that parent looks for Boone in the App Store, right? We download the app for free, and now that parent has the option to find the information they're looking for. So all of that information we just looked at, right? Calendars, lunch menus, directories, sports scores, all of that's going to be easily accessible. Okay, so if I wanted to get in touch with somebody, if I wanted to find what's going on within our events, we can find all of that here. But one key part that Julie had talked to me, and I think Jill also mentioned this too, was two-way communication, right? How do we solicit information from the community? So one really cool feature of the app is that a parent, community member, or just a family member could download the app and use what we call our forms. So you see these here, like ask a question, report a bully, volunteer, and they can get in touch with you. So the really neat thing is, let's say I had a question, I can download the app right here, put my question in, send it off. That goes directly to whoever you designate. Okay. So when you're thinking about that two-way communication, we're not asking a parent to go fill out 16 different things on the website. They can do it right here through the app. And the really neat thing is you get to customize this really however you want. So it doesn't have to just be boxes, right? We can have drop-down menus. We can have certain fields required, certain fields not required. So whether it's something super general like ask a question, or something like report a concern, report a bully. I know a lot of schools are worried about trying to make that process really simple. We can do all that through the app. And again, that comes to you for your eyes only. So you're not having to worry about that being broadcast to the world. But this way you have essentially one tool for a parent to interact with the district. Okay. So wanted to pause there because I know that's a really a key point there for the board, because I know you guys have been thinking about that two-way communication piece. Julie, anything to add to that, or any quick questions from the board or the team?
I don't think so.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so we've talked about the app, right? That's what that's what you all could download right there from your phones. Then the next step is the website. So we will then build and host a new website for the district as well, because when you think about that prospective teacher or that parent, they're going to Google you for the first time, right? Before they know about the app, they're going to Google you. So we want to make sure that website has a really, really clean, easy user experience. So what you're going to see is a really modern design, 1 to 2 clicks away for everything you're looking for. So whether you're that prospective teacher, whether you're a current family member, not only are you going to see the information that you need, but we can also start to form an impression, right? And again, we work with over 10% of the districts in the United States right now on this. So a lot of different options, a lot of different design elements, but we work with you on that process to make it as simple as possible. So your admin doesn't really have to spend much time on it. Great. So a couple questions I know boards in the past have talked through on the websites. Obviously, ADA compliance, big deal, right? Making sure that it's accessible. We work with several schools for the blind and schools for the deaf. So as you can imagine, they have a very vested interest in making sure that their websites are accessible. So the neat thing is we've been able to apply those same tools for every district that we work with. So we guarantee all of our designs are accessible. And then we also will teach and coach you and build checks in place into the website to make sure that there aren't accessibility issues long-term. Okay.
I have two questions. First, I assume it's FOSSO FERBA compliant. And secondly, I know we're still in the preliminary process. Can you ballpark us a price?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually sent exact numbers over to Julie as well, and I think she can go ahead and walk you guys through that as well, because we kind of worked out a situation where you guys are paying for it through Title IV, so the majority of it, we figured out a way to schedule it over the years. Yeah.
So we did, Apogee had agreed to also prorate their amount this year, since we wouldn't be starting at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So their price typically for the app and the website on a regular basis is $5,500 plus $3 a student. That's what it costs on an annual basis. And then they have a setup fee. And Casey, I don't recall, because I remember what we took away from it. I don't remember what the total cost was, but what we would have is we get credit for the amount that we currently pay to our student information system. So that would get taken off of the bill. And so what it came down to was $8,000, but that would be spread across 2 years. So we have $8,800 in Title IV that we would pay for this year. And then next year, the remaining portion of the setup fee plus the approximately $11,000 out of Title IV for the following years. So after next year, there would be no more setup fee. That would be gone. It would be just the annual fee moving forward.
Yeah, and for you all at about 2,000 students, the annual cost structure came to about 11,500, really kind of dependent upon that student count. But like Julie was mentioning, the setup fee is split over the years so that you're able to essentially use the Title IV funds for that.
Okay, and then who does the maintenance of it as far as inputting the teachers, their email addresses, the staff email addresses every year, so that those are up to date and we don't sign on a year and a half from now and find teachers that retired a year ago.
Yeah.
And we can't find any of the new hires.
Yeah. To me, that's the best part about the whole thing. And I think that's why Julie wants to buy us again, right? Is because of the ease of use. Because like, to your point, I can't tell you how many times I do this when I meet with a district. You look up information, it's 2 superintendents outdated, right? And school board members haven't been updated. So what we've done, and this is really what separates Apogee from any other company that works on branding and communication tools for schools, we've created what's called a publishing platform. So all the initial information that you have on your current site, we'll move that over for you. Okay, so that's no cost, that's all included. But then ongoing, this is the cool part. So we've built ThrillShare, and I think that from the principals' perspectives too, I think this will make their lives a lot easier. When they want to make updates, when they want to share out information or make posts, you're now able to come into ThrillShare, type up a quick message, remember the board meeting is tonight. We are talking about bonds, right? You talk, whatever that message is, type up that message. But now when you want to share something, when you want to make those posts, you're able to post that really quickly and also hit any social media sites you want. So Facebook, Twitter, hit your app and your website, and then also do your texting and calling. Okay. So instead of having to go finagle with the back end of a website that's really clunky and difficult, you're now coming into our platform that makes it about as easy as possible for a school to manage. Okay, so you're able to do all these quick updates. You're able to quickly change in and out contacts, and it's all as easy as you see right here.
So today, the people that are closely related to those changes are going to be able to make the changes instead of having to wait for people to do that, like we currently do. And so that's something that makes it almost simultaneous. So as soon as they're on staff, as soon as they have an email, we can have it changed as soon as that occurs. But they will do the initial work of putting all of that in for us initially. And then as we go through changes, as staff change or things were to change, then we can determine who does that and how accessible it is to who. So that's what I like about this, is that we have control over that and we can make sure that it is more readily available. That if I wanted to go in and make a change to our website right now, I could do that if we had it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from board members?
What funding did you say it was? Title IV?
Correct, Title IV.
So do we typically run a $1,000 a month surplus that we could afford this ongoing?
Every year, Title IV funds are something that we look to see what we can spend money with. And so this is something that we would be prioritizing since it's one of the board goals as far as what we would put toward Title IV. Title IV can also be utilized for a variety of things. One of the things that we are using Title IV for funds for this year were I believe we did our behavior doctor out of this fund as well this year. So it has varied year by year, but this would be something that we could designate every year if we deem this as necessary and a priority for our board.
Yeah, and I think one other thing I'll add to that, Julie, before we hop off here, like a lot of districts talk about their brand, right? A lot of districts talk about public relations, but what we find is most districts don't really know where to start. So the obvious choices are, hey, let's go post on social media. Facebook and Twitter are good, right? But then long term, when we're thinking about how do we create a consistent, uniform message, how do we make sure that people understand the good things going on, we want to make sure that no matter what platform people interact with us on, whether it is the website, social media, the app, that they see the good things happening. And then with Thrill Share, we make it so easy for people to post, because I mean, at the end of the day, if people can't update your website with the great things going on, how are people going to see that consistently, right? And I think that's why Aptogee's worked for so many districts way smaller than you guys and also your size.
And so the other thing is our teachers, they'll be able to communicate and have I see there's a teacher's page. So each teacher can have a page to communicate with their kids and with their parents. And if the parents have a question, they can use this app, turn it on and go to the teacher page or someplace and easily send the teacher a message as far as I'm picking up Jimmy at 3 o'clock, or his grandma's picking up Jimmy at 3 o'clock, and be able to communicate that way. Is that correct?
So yeah, from the high level, we can definitely set it up to where teachers can have that teacher page, that information. Parents can submit questions. Like something as granular as I'm picking up Jimmy at 3 o'clock, like I wouldn't necessarily recommend them put that through like the website, given that there might be a delay on when they see it. I would probably recommend a different mode there. But the spirit of what you're getting at is correct, that we can have that those questions, that information come from parents and then route it to the whatever person that you deem appropriate there.
Okay. Any further questions or else? This is an action item, board members. Pat and Pam, you're both queued up, so go ahead.
I'll just say that this would be a real added addition to our big number 2 goal of communication, and make it probably more accessible to lots of people than having to go to Facebook page and then go, or our website, and go looking for stuff and then not finding it or getting frustrated. If it's truly this user friendly, I think that's a real bonus for communication.
One of the things that I forgot to mention is this app would also allow people to select what they got information about. So if you have a child that's only at Franklin and you didn't want all the information from the high school and from Page and Lincoln and the middle school, you can select what you want the information about. So it gives some control to families as to what they would like to be receiving, and then notifications similar to what they're used to with social media. They would have notifications from the district in that manner as well.
I got two quick questions. I have two kids in elementary, and both their teachers use different apps for communication and sharing projects and so forth. Would our district have all the teachers use this as opposed to them selecting the apps that they would like? And second, could you give a couple examples of what we would have had to give up in the previous years in order to fund this app, just so I can get an idea what kind of cost I guess it is?
So with the apps, I'm not sure which apps you're referring to, and maybe I think Jill might know. So I'm going to maybe Jeremy, can you speak to which apps you're talking about with regard to the teachers, so that I can make sure I answer that question appropriately?
One of them, Seesaw, and I cannot remember the one that Mrs. Zimmerman uses, but I think it's different.
District-wide, we would continue to use Seesaw, as that's a platform for communication, but also for pushing out student work and for the students to respond. So that app would continue to be in use because it does have a different purpose as well. I know teachers communicate with Facebook. I know, especially at secondary levels, teachers communicate with Remind. They use a variety of different tools, and I think we would try to streamline them, but it might depend on what the purpose of the tool is, and if it has some of those other purposes too, like student work and some of those things built in.
Yeah, the apps that are more instructional in nature, I do not see this replacing that. This is solely for communication purposes, not instructional purposes. So if we had other communication tools, yeah, we would try to streamline that so that we would not have people having to go to multiple sources. So that's part of that multiple Facebook piece. We've talked at great length as an administrative team with Apogee about what that would look like, so that we can ensure that everyone who wanted the information would have it, but in a way that wouldn't require going to 5 different places.
My mistake, both of my kids' teachers use Seesaw. I was mistaken on that.
Any other questions from board members?
And as far as what we would have to give up, since I wasn't here previously, I'd have to refer to the admin team, which is one of the reasons why I did. Our first meeting was with Jill and Bog and Casey and I, and then we met with the entire admin team prior to coming to the board about this.
If you're asking what we've used that fund for in the past, is that what your question is? Yes. Title IV is a newer funding source. It's a newer categorical, and I believe this is our 3rd year that we've had it. The first year we used that to add some YSS support services at the lower elementary level, added another family liaison. We've since kind of restructured how those family liaisons are across the district and our supports with YSS, but that's what we used it for the first year. And last year, I believe we had quite a bit unspent because we had some things in the works that didn't happen. Is that correct, Mitch? We were working on a career counselor or something else in a counseling need. But again, you can only put a portion of the funds towards technology. So what Mrs. Strepp is talking about funding Apogee here, you can only use a total of 15% of the funds towards something like technology. So there would still be additional funds in that pot of money to use for well-rounded education, mental health supports, and things like that.
We also will be saving a couple thousand on our Infinite Campus too. So
communications we already use, is there an expense for any of those current ones that we would discontinue for this?
The one that we spoke about would be more the messaging from our student information system, and that's only $2,000 because all it provides us is the opportunity to do some pretty limited communication, but that would be replaced and we wouldn't have that cost anymore. About $2,000.
Okay. Any further discussion or any motions, or do we need to move on to the next subject?
Can I just reiterate real quick that we would not want to use this for checking students out. So anybody who's watching, parents or staff members, we would still want them to go through our call in the school if they had to check out their student early. So just to make clarification on that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I would move to table this discussion until our next meeting.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Ms. Stevens, seconded by Mr. Pritchard. Table this discussion until the next meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor of tabling until the next meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we'll come back and hopefully have some more finalized information for
Is
this
there
next.
is there a sample or something that you could give us access to, Casey, that we could play with? Or you know, anything to that effect, so that we could check it out a little more fully before our next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, you can download any of our district's apps, right? All of them are publicly available, downloadable for free. I actually just got a push notification from West Monona. Didn't make that up, but so what I can do is I know Julie has a list. I think Jill has downloaded a few as well. You can download some of those, and then I'll also share the link to the drawing that we put together that has your branding and some of your information on there. Keep in mind that's just a drawing; it's not a real app, though. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Even if we were to move forward, there are a lot of decisions to be made with regard to formatting of a website, things like that. And that's something that I had anticipated, if this were to move forward, our PR committee would work on. So that's something I will make sure our PR committee knows, that that's something that we may need to reschedule another meeting for after our next board meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to our. Thank you very much for the presentation, and we are now going to move on to our fast data review. Dr. James, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. This one was a little late in getting attached to board docs because the window for screening ended on Friday. And given all that's gone on this school year, we used up until that last moment on Friday to screen all of our students, particularly our students who are online, coordinating times to meet them online to complete their literacy or their math screening was not an easy feat. So I just want to give kudos to our teachers and our instructional coaches who worked incredibly hard to gather data that we can use to make decisions on our students. So this was kind of compiled on Saturday morning, and here it is for you. What I tried to compile for you is usually a comparison of our students, and I like to give you kind of where they are or how they came in the screening on the FAST assessment in the fall, and then compare that same group of kids. I say a simple cohort because there could be kids that moved in and out of the grade level, but that same group of kids, and let you know kind of where they were the spring before, because we look at, you know, was there any summer slide when we've done summer programming in the past? Sometimes we look to see, is there some impact there on stopping that summer slide? This year I bring you winter data because that's the last screening data that we had. So when I have those comparisons of a group of students at a grade level, I'm comparing where they were in beginning of February of 2020 to where they are now. And, you know, I think all of us were curious to get our data because it's another, this data, another classroom data and benchmarking data that we have for students. It's just another guide on where are we, knowing that there was some instruction and some things that students missed last spring. And we really need this data to help guide us and what decisions we need to make to best meet groups of students' needs as well as individuals. So the FAST assessment is both a reading and a math assessment. It's meant to be a screener. So again, it's just one indication of student needs. And then we take that data and if students don't meet the benchmarks that are you know, determined where a student should typically be to be on track to be proficient, then we dig a little deeper and we say, what other data do we have to help that particular student, or what data do we have to help a whole class of students or grade levels? And we do look at individual classes because one second grade classroom may have different needs and different makeup of students than another one next door. And you know, the middle school teachers dig into the data and they may have a second hour class that needs something different in reading than their third or fourth hour class of that same grade level. So that's the work that the teachers do with this data to really make sure that we provide those individual needs. So you can see on the fast reading data is the first chart. The younger students take a series of assessments that are each a 1-minute timed assessment of different early literacy skills. And so those assessments change with each screening period, depending on, again, we want to build them up as readers. So as they progress through kindergarten and first grade, the subtests are, you know, change. So there might not be a clear comparison from winter to fall and the exact assessments that the kids took, but then there's a composite that comes together, and that's what's in the bold number, is the percent of students that are proficient. You can see on that data, I think we had a hunch, but the data confirmed for us that, you know, that fourth quarter of spring is really important for early readers. When we think about kindergarten students, really, they've learned their letters, they learn their sounds, they begin to blend words, and then it's in spring that they really start to, you know, put it all together and read a text. And they miss that opportunity with us. And so our current first graders came in at 50% of them meeting the first grade benchmarks, but gosh, when they were kindergartners in winter, that same group of students, 92% of them were meeting the benchmark. So we were on a great progression, and that lost time for learning really makes a bigger difference. And you see that in the data as the kids get older, the differences in their winter to this fall screening. There's maybe a little bit of a drop, but it's not as drastic as what we see in the lower levels. And again, that time is so precious in that continuum. That's the whole reason why we try to have our readers, we work so hard to have them proficient by the end of third grade, because that's, you learn to read until third grade, and then you read to learn after that. And our data, you know, indicates that that loss of time was huge for our little people, and we knew that, and this data definitely confirms that. The first set of data through the middle is kind of early reading foundational skills and their fluency and accuracy, how you know, accurate they are in pronouncing the words. And then are they reading at a rate that's fast enough to help them comprehend? And then on the right side of the chart, the A reading is more of a comprehensive measure. It measures their vocabulary. It might measure their ability to tackle word parts and their comprehension, as well as some of those foundational skills. So it's a broader measure of their reading. And we give that assessment beginning in second grade. So you can see a comparison of where a group of kids might have been in winter on that assessment, and then the same comparison to where they are this fall. Again, it's screening data, so we take that data and come back and say, now what do the kids need next? The second page of data, I'll let you scroll down, Mitch. I think you're controlling. Thanks for driving. The second page of data is our fast math. Again, the younger students take a variety of subtests that really look at their ability really for number sense. You know, do they understand sequence of numbers? Can they identify numbers? Can they match pictures of 5 to the numeral 5? Those types of things. Can they break apart numbers and put them back together? And so you can see there all those subtests there at kindergarten and first grade. And then second and third graders also take what's called an automaticity test. It's a time test, and again, it's just how automatic can they be with some of that fact fluency. Do they know their math facts that then help build into their just ability to you know, be fluent as they learn to process at higher levels in math. Then on the right side of the chart, again, A math is very similar to the A reading test in that it's adaptive and it's more of a broad measure. It gives them a variety of types of questions to get at a kid's overall understandings in math and those concepts and skills. And what's nice is they get a score for how they did on the A math. It's just a standard number. It doesn't mean a lot as a simple score of a 215 or whatever that number might be, but then that correlates to a certain set of skills that those students should be ready to learn. And we can use that data to determine some interventions or what a whole class of students might need next. So that's kind of our next step. We've started to dig in with our reading data, and we have some meetings set up this week to dig into that math data a little bit closer and say, okay, what do certain groups of students need next in their learning journey? So again, it's screening data. It gives us that indication of where do our groups of kids need to keep learning. And we've had lots of conversations in a short amount of time since we wrapped up testing last week about, you know, some of this data is different than we would have expected to see had we continued on the path we planned on last school year that kind of got derailed in March. And so, you know, how do we accelerate learning? What are some steps that we wouldn't typically be taking this fall that we might need to do differently to meet whole groups of students' needs or some of those individual needs that are more intense too?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. James. One question I have, this might be too early, is have we been able to break out those kids that are 100% online versus those kids who have been in the classroom every day for the first quarter, as far as where their FAST scores are now? I'm just interested in seeing how well our online program is working, or if it's working better than our classroom. I don't know.
I haven't broken them out on every grade level. Now I guarantee those teachers have taken a look and they know where their students have fallen. I think in general, many of the online teachers would say that as they got their data back, they wondered how accurate it was because they had to give it across a screen. And so, that comparing that data to the data of sitting next to a student and listening to them read, is, they said, gosh, I wish I could have sat with the student as they read, because I might have had a clearer picture of their reading than the student was able to see the passage that they could read on the screen and their home. And via video conferencing, we could listen and we could hear their reading, but it's just not quite the same. And statewide, I think, in a lot of our network meetings, we've heard the same thing, that sometimes we'd get a score back and say, I wonder if they had read next to me, if that would have been higher or not. And so that was definitely a challenge to collect all of that. And I think some of those scores were lower than we anticipated, but we don't necessarily know if that's due to the program or due to the assessment being a different format.
Thank you. Other questions from other board members?
It seems like a daunting task to catch kids up and then get them to the proficiency mark by like the end of first grade or whatever grade they're in. I'm wondering, with the success our mitigation protocols have had, if it's been talked about to re-implement, win times, so that we can group these kids into, smaller groups where they're working with kids that are at their level. I know that it seems like that'd be a critical way to kind of boost kids or give kids, activities that maybe are more challenging for them. I know for my son particularly, one time was his favorite part of the day, and it's been very sad for most of them that they haven't been able to see kids from other classes, other teachers. I think that's critical, but I'm wondering if that's a possibility to help maybe get some kids back up to speed, or maybe give some people some extension activities also, rather than keeping them in the classroom all day.
Well, I'll tell you again, we just finished screening on Friday, so we haven't gotten too far on some of those things, but those questions have certainly come up, as I think the principals both could speak to. I'm looking at our lower elementary principals, but Scott as well, that those are questions about how do we meet these needs now that we have this data. And I know win time is a question that has come up, or how do we use, structure our own classroom time, as well as think about class-wide. If 50% of a grade, didn't meet the benchmark in first grade, and we know that they missed the opportunity to really get into sight words and connected text as kindergartners, that's a whole class need that we might need to adjust our whole class instruction. That isn't something necessarily that we would address with win time, because there are so many kids that have that need. So just looking at our progressions and our timelines of our essential standards is really where we are right now, and saying, okay, so what are the big gaps that we need to be backfilling right now that are more of a class-wide need, that typically maybe would be a win time type intervention, only this school year it's more the whole class or the whole one classroom of kids might need that. And then are there opportunities to work with our Title I staff for some small groups that might be more like win time? And I think we have to ask if win time is something that we can safely mitigate. That might be something to put back in, but we just aren't quite there yet. Do you want to?
Jill, this is Pam.
And I was just going to mention that while we might not have win time as it was implemented before, it doesn't mean our teachers aren't still differentiating for their students, and that they aren't still trying to meet the needs of the students that are struggling. That's still occurring, just in a different way, because we aren't able to do win as we did in the past. So I certainly don't want our parents to think that if we see a need with their children's learning that we aren't able to address it. We are, but just in a different way, and maybe not in our preferred method, but certainly it's not something that's not happening at all.
Okay, I believe I heard Pam with a question.
Yeah. I scroll down to the next page. I think you do address a lot of your ideas there of what you'd like to do. And that maybe I should have skipped ahead, but I did.
You did skip ahead, but that's just fine. Yes, this is kind of our next steps and where we are, is having our.
I think that answered Jeremy's question a little better for me.
Yeah, the last part of the report just kind of speaks to how we typically use our data, and a little bit of a COVID lens too there, that particularly this year, the things that we might do as we dig in are a little bit different, but it still starts with what is our whole class need, or are there some things that our core instruction needs to shift to address with our kids, or places where our core instruction, we certainly have used this data in the past to say, our core instruction needs a stronger phonics program, and we implemented some new materials at K2 last year that we felt really positive about during the school year as our kids were meeting those benchmarks. And when we reflect on the data that we got this fall, and we look at for instance, in our fast reading, our overall accuracy level, our third graders, current third graders as second graders, it's almost shocking that they are more accurate this fall as third graders than they were in winter when they were, you would expect that we would have seen some sort of a slide, but they worked so hard on their phonics, and we all kind of felt like, gosh, we really are, they're stronger readers than we've seen in the past because of these new core materials that we're implementing. And to see this data come in and hold that, yeah, they held on to that skill. Same with Autumn and I were discussing our younger readers today too, that the word segmenting and the word blending is something that they really worked on with that phonics program that we saw held true, even though they had 5 months of no instruction. And so we do use this data to say, are there some whole class core instructional needs that we really need too, that we should either be looking at different practices to implement or different materials, or in this particular case, are there some whole class things that maybe a grade level wouldn't typically do that we need to alter our instruction for first? And I think that's really important to put that focus on that whole class and our core instruction. That's where we'll make the biggest shifts, and then look at what can we do with small groups and individuals.
I was just going to add to what Julie said about to elementary student, win time might be that time when I get to go see a different teacher or get to go see my friends, but to our staff, win time is the time that we provide targeted interventions based on the data and what we know that individual students need. And so our multi-tiered system of support is still in place. We just have to provide those supports a little bit differently than we have in the past. So I think that is a common misunderstanding when we've said that, well, we're not doing win time. We're still doing our tier 3 support, which is what win time is. But at least for us at Franklin, that's what we consider win time. It just looks a little bit differently since we're not sharing kids.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from board members? Hearing none, thank you very much, Dr. James, for your report. And we're going to move on to the next topic. Mitch, I believe the financial overview. Julie and Mitch, I'll let you guys discuss, have the table here.
Yep, so we just finalized last year's numbers. Just got the card done, our certified annual report. And here's the presentation for that. This form, you guys kind of same as last year. This shows the fund balance change in general fund, student activity fund management, all the other funds. We got our beginning balance, our revenues, our expenditures, and the ending balance. You can see general fund. That's the bread and the butter of the operation. We went from 4.8 to 5.4. Student activity funds, that'll be all of our support. Our athletics management is our insurance fund. Early retirement. Pearl is our playground equipment levy. That went up as well. Save, our statewide sales tax, so that's our pennies tax. It went down a little bit. We had projects that we paid last year. Our PEPL fund went up 6.6%. Debt service, where we pay out our bonds, that's running good. That was paid out in July. Enterprise fund, so that would be our nutrition fund, and our BEAP fund, that's staying strong. And then our internal services are self-funded health insurance, which is staying strong as well. Dental insurance.
Okay, those funds all look stable. Next.
Yep, so this is the fund cash balance comparison change. So you can see how much the cash has changed in the past 7 years here or so. You can see general fund has been increasing in cash, which is good. Our student activity fund is decreasing a little bit, but we got a little higher this year. Our management fund is staying pretty common, about 500, 600,000. Pearl fund, we're keep on continually adding that one and not spend too much out of it. Our save tax fund is staying anywhere between 4 and 5 million. We were doing some building in there, that's why that's so high. Our PEPL fund is staying between 6 and 700,000. Debt service, anywhere between $1 million and $5 million, depending on where our debt payments land. And our enterprise funds, they're continuing to grow. So our nutrition program is gaining some cash. And our internal service, we're increasing our self-insured dental plan as well. And then our trust, that is our scholarships and a couple other things out of there. That is decreasing slightly, but it's really not changing much.
Okay, thank you.
Next one is our spending authority. It is part of our board policy, fiscal management, to target to get 15% for unspent. So this is the money that we can spend. Our target is 15%, no less than 10 and no more than 20. Last year we had 3.99%. This year we're right at 15.08%. So we're right on the money. This is the third year in a row that we have added to our authority. This year, if we pass our social deficit, which will be coming up, we'll be adding 503,000 to our unspent authority. So we're good right there. Projections, that's always a work in progress. So we'll work on that next few months, probably for work session next time to see where that lands.
Right.
And then our unrestricted fund balance, we always, this is also part of our board policy, for a minimum of 15% of that next year's revenue. Last year we're at 16.52 and this year we're at 18.72. So financially we're doing great. We are increasing our balances, increasing our cash. So we're looking really good right now.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for that report. Board members, any questions? I will just say, as being on here for 7 years, when I first came on the board, there were some pretty lean years, and we were getting down on less than the 10% solvency on the spending authority. And these numbers look actually very good. And if you compare our numbers with other school districts in the state, the majority of school districts would be jealous of our numbers. Questions, concerns from board members?
I have a question, Brian. Mitch, you mentioned early retirement out of the management levy fund. Was that where it was on the first page?
Yep. So that comes out of our management fund. At the end of the year, we ended at 626,000. We did have insurance premiums about 350,000. So we'll decrease in that fund balance right away. I assume at the end of the year we might be at 525, 550.
Okay, we haven't talked about, early retirement this year yet.
No, not yet.
And that would be something maybe we'd want to be talking about soon.
Because historically we've done it every other year, but that's definitely something that we could put on the agenda to discuss. Or
I believe we did last year, didn't we?
Further. Yep. So we had 3 of them retire last year.
Yeah.
Off early retirement.
Given all of the weird situations that are out there, I think we should discuss it.
Okay. We'll try to get that on the agenda for the next meeting. Okay. And now, Mr. Lewis, you get to keep going here on the annual settlement.
Yep. So this is one of those annual things. We just have to approve the cash that was in our accounts as of June 30. This is straight from your financials from that month, and this month as well for approval for the closing of June. You can see we had $12 million in IceJet. That's our investment account. Our sinking and reserve account, that'd be our escrow account for some of our bonds. And then we have 3.8 million in Vision Bank.
Okay, is there a move to approve this statement?
I would move to approve fiscal year 20 cash book balances as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Mr. Pritchard, secondary by Mrs. Teben to approve the annual settlement depository balances as of June 30th, 2020. Any questions? Hearing no further questions or discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Next, we're going to go to the special education deficit. And Mr. Lewis.
So this is one of those annual things that we have, just like the last two items. Every year, special ed report takes on our revenues and our expenditures out, and then we see if we underspent or overspent on our special ed. This year we have overspent $1,294,468.88. So this is one of those annual things to ask for allowable growth and supplemental state aid to cover those costs. And that will help our unspent balance authority if we do the full amount greatly. So we recommend approving.
And for those listening and for our new board, Julie, could you please give us a 30-second, 10,000-foot view of why we always overspend on special ed?
Sure. So special education has never been fully funded by the federal government or the state governments. And so it's very typical for school districts to have to overspend to be able to meet the needs of the students, even though there is some supplemental weighting. It doesn't ever meet the needs of what we actually need to utilize to meet those needs. So it's not unusual for school districts to overspend. It is our district's purpose in trying to reduce the amount that we're overspending, and that is something that we're working to do. But it's definitely, we are in good company in being in the position of needing to go to the SBRC to ask for the allowable growth piece.
One note on that deficit, being as we were in COVID closure, we weren't able to claim Medicaid for 26% of the year. So that's one reason why we're increased from last year. That was probably about $250 that we thought we were missing. So that's one of the reasons why it went up.
So that explains why. So we're back basically about 1 million even over, which is a little bit more when we have been past years, but most years it seems like we're at least 500,000 over. And as Ms. Trupa said, the state legislature gives us so much money for all the IEPs, but we have to follow what the IEPs require us to do, no matter what the cost. And so therefore most districts end up in the negative, and so this gets put back against property taxes. So when the state legislature says, oh, we're reducing your property taxes, now they're just putting it back onto the local governments to put them back up to the prior levels, unfortunately. Any other questions?
Yes, Julie, I have a question. In your Friday update, you did discuss the Senate File 2360 and talked about the possibility of therapeutic classrooms. Is there a timeline for that? Because if we could keep more kids in Boone, if we had the correct settings for them.
Yes, there is a timeline. We'll need to apply for that this year to be able to utilize it for next year. So that is why we will be exploring whether that's an avenue that we would like to take.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I move to accept the certification.
Senate file, they are offering grants to school districts that are offering therapeutic classrooms. And so that's where this conversation is coming from, is just the opportunity that the state is providing to fund startups of those programs. And usually the startup costs of such programs impede districts' abilities to do so. So this would be a prime opportunity for our district to at least explore that possibility.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Gentlemen here in the building, or Mrs. Teeman, any questions?
No,
Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I was just going to move to accept the certification of the special ed report.
Okay. Is there a second?
I would second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Stevens, secondary by Mr. Elfin, to approve the special ed supplemental LEA. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. So next is the Ijag renewal. Mr. Tripa.
We're missing one.
We have another one before that.
Oops, I'm sorry. I missed that. The LEAP allowable cost. I'm sorry.
So this is kind of like the special ed. We overspent in our English language learner program by $6,927. We don't receive enough funding to pay for that. That's teacher. So it's just getting some allowable growth to cover those costs.
I'm sorry about that. Any further discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion on the table?
Again, this Pat, I move to accept the LEP allowable growth.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second. This is Pam.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Stevens, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to approve the LEAP allowable cost. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, and now the Ijag renewal.
Yes, so this renewal is simply a renewal of our Ijag agreement that we've had so that we can continue to provide this service to our students. In full disclosure, having not been here before, I did also ask Dr. James to look over the contract and make sure that the items that we wish to have in the contract remained in the contract. So Dr. James has been able to help us out in that and can probably speak better until after this year as regard to any additional changes or adjustments that were made. I don't believe that they did do that, but if you have questions, I am going to direct you to Dr. James this time.
Pam, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pat, here, of course.
No, go ahead, Pam. I was just asking Mitch to mute.
I just left my mic on accidentally. I
Okay,
don't have a question.
okay. Gentlemen, any questions? Okay, hearing no further questions, is there a motion on the table?
I move to approve the Ijag renewal.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to approve the Ijag renewal. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next is the work session, October work session. Mrs. Trupa?
Yes, so for our work session, I would recommend that we provide the board with updates and an opportunity to have a discussion regarding our social emotional learning plan for this year, along with standards-based grading. I'd like to be able to present the background of Portrait of a Graduate during the board work session, in addition to any bond discussion that we wanted to continue. As I believe Jeremy had suggested our next meeting, I had originally planned to share out about bond committees, but we can add to that agenda to accommodate the need that was expressed earlier during this meeting.
And where will that meeting be? Okay.
They'll still be practicing.
Okay, so we'll have that in this room where we'll have a lot of
probably.
we'll have a lot of social distancing for people to be here at 5 o'clock.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Next item. That's on 5 o'clock, 2 weeks from tonight, on the 27th.
26, I believe, isn't it?
26, yeah, 26, yeah. Okay, superintendent's report.
So I just, let me make sure I'm off. I just want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to look at the Iowa Association of School Board Conference agenda and note that there is also a pre-conference opportunity on the 10th of November, in addition to the conference that focuses on equity. I will be attending that. So if any other board members would like to attend, please make sure to let Mitch know that that's of interest to you as well. I also would like to mention that the guest speakers at the Iowa Association of School Boards convention would be of high interest given some of the topics that I've been a part of since arriving in Boone. One is a speaker who talks about homeless to Harvard and what we can do to help all students achieve at high levels. So I think that is right in line with what our board and our district is wanting to ensure for every student that goes through Boone schools. So that is definitely a speaker that I think would be of benefit to all of us to see and hear from. And I'm trying to remember the other one that they had, but it was in a similar fashion, someone who had gone from some pretty extreme poverty to find a lot of success in the business world. And so I think that the topics at the Iowa Association of School Board Convention are timely for us as a district. And I know that all of you have signed up in some capacity, but I just wanted to point out those pieces in that when they're virtual, oftentimes it's easy to find yourself doing other things. And I would just encourage you to ensure that you have been able to put some time aside to participate in those and some of the breakout sessions that I think are most valuable when we are able to be in person, such as school finance are still being offered as well. So certainly want to encourage you to participate with that. I think it's something that we had talked previously about having school boardsmanship points. That's something that provides us with some extra school boardsmanship points in addition to at the table discussions that we'll be having throughout the year. So just a great opportunity for school board members to get some professional development. Unfortunately, they only provide it once a year, but it is coming up in November. So just wanted to make sure that you had some time to look at their agenda.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping that all of our board members will be able to at least participate on one day. It's too bad it's going to be virtual this year. I've always enjoyed going down to meetings in Des Moines. I've picked up a lot of new good information about being on the school board, what to do, what to look for, and learning about education. It's been a big key. Hopefully we'll be able to go back in person next November. Anything else? Okay, hearing none. We will close this portion of the meeting. Take about a 5-minute recess, then we'll reconvene as a closed session.